Recognize Ms. Malliotakis from New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. We greatly appreciate your testimony. I come from New York City. New York really took the prize when it came to putting in place arbitrary policies. We had, you mentioned, extended states of emergency. I think we had one of the last to be lifted. Arbitrary mandates, vaccine passports, religious and other freedoms that were suppressed in the name of public health. And look, I'm vaccinated. I held a clinic for those who want to do it, but I have a problem with the government dictating to people that they need to do this or else lose their livelihoods. And I thank Ms. Williams for being here, and I think that was very brave of what you did to leave your job at the time that you did to take a stand. Now here in New York City, city employees were fired because they did not get the mandated coronavirus vaccine by the February deadline. Over 1,500 city employees were fired as a result of the mandate, and thousands of city workers who applied for a medical or religious exemption, they were left in bureaucratic limbo, waiting to find out if their waivers had been accepted or denied. Fast forward, obviously, there were many lawsuits, and thankfully a state judge ruled that the mandate for municipal workers was enacted illegally, and those employees who were fired had to be immediately reinstated with back pay. That has not still happened, by the way, and I think that's important to note because I still have constituents who apparently the mayor doesn't want to adhere to what the judge said. So I would like to know, both from a legal counsel perspective and then from just the impact that this has had on society and mistrust of government. And Ms. Runyon and Mr. Bartosh, if you could please comment.
Thank you for your question. So as I said in my opening statement, we represent over 4,000 Navy SEALs with respect to their religious accommodation requests that they had submitted to the Navy. And the fact that the Navy, the DoD, has a process for reviewing accommodation requests and that was not adhered to, specifically the Religious Freedom Restoration Act is something that the Department of Defense acknowledges is a process that they need to follow, and they didn't. That's extremely concerning. That's what we're challenging in the lawsuit, and that's why we won the preliminary injunction that we received back in January of 2022.
Are there any actions we can take as members of Congress to hold these municipal, and in this case the federal, accountable for not adhering to what the judges have said, or what, quite frankly, we as Congress have said when we said that this needed to be lifted, this mandate on our military?
Absolutely. I think that, we use the judicial process to do what we needed to do to get imminent relief, but I think ultimately Congress can institute legislation that can make sure that these things don't happen again, and if they do, that it's not incumbent upon the individuals who are being harmed to have to correct the errors.
Yeah. Dr. Bartosh, could you please talk to some of the impacts this has had on those families that have been fired, they've lost their livelihood, and is this happening in other cities, or is New York City still the one that's kind of hanging out there, not doing the right thing by the city workers who dedicated so much of their life to service of our city?
Yeah, so I'd like to say something about public health, the public health community, which is quite shocking to me. If you go to a public health department in the country, the term equity and equality and sort of inclusion is plastered all over the department, all over the papers that are written there. And yet during COVID, certain types of people were considered, more equal than others. And I think it's important to recognize that individuals who lost their jobs severely suffered, right? We're talking about lost income, lost savings, not being able to pay your mortgage or your rent, having marital stress, stress on your children. And we know from what's called the social determinants of health, which is, again, a main concept or principle in public health, right? What are the social determinants of health? Everything that determines, right, your life, your income, your status, right? Your happiness, your psychological well-being. And we know that these things, if you have, for example, you're fired from your job, that can have long-term implications, not only for you, but for your children, right? And yet we have these individuals in the country who lost their jobs because they didn't comply with these vaccination requirements. How many people lost their jobs? There's actually no study telling us, estimating how many people lost their jobs, despite the fact that billions and billions of dollars has gone into researching vaccine hesitancy and misinformation, et cetera. Yet we don't know how many people the mandates harmed and how they were harmed. So I actually have a project where we're estimating how many people were harmed, and I was hoping that we would have that data here today, but we don't. And probably in about a month's time, we'll have a number for you, and I'd like to share that with you.
Well, we appreciate that, and thank you for your time, and we will continue to advocate for those city employees of New York that were fired to make sure that they are rehired, and also for our military men and women who were wrongfully subjected to a lot of things. And as you mentioned, to not be able to get your benefits, health care, because of this was outrageous. Thank you.